Hello and welcome to my channel. Say hi to a happy day. In this channel, I would like to share tales and stories I personally picked and or my kids' favorite book stories. Let's enjoy listening while I read to you Disney's Peter Pan. This story begins on a quiet street in London at the home of the Darling family. Before bed every evening, Wendy would tell her younger brothers fantastic stories of Peter Pan's many marvelous adventures in Neverland. They believed he was real and made him the hero of all their nursery games while fighting off pirates. But that night was to be Wendy's last night in the nursery. Wendy's father had decided that the next day she would move into her own room of her own. She would have to be practical. It was time for Wendy to grow up. Peter Pan waited until the children were fast asleep. Then he crept in through the window. A sparkling light followed him. It was Tinkerbell. Tinkerbell was a pixie and one of Peter Pan's best friends. The children woke up and were delighted to see Peter Pan. Peter Pan, I knew you'd come back. I saved your shadow for you, Wendy exclaimed as she ran to get her sewing basket. I'm so glad you came back tonight, Wendy said, because it's my last night in the nursery. No, I won't have it, Peter said. Come on. But where are we going? Asked Wendy. To Neverland. You'll never grow up there, Peter said. But Peter, how do we get to Neverland? Asked Wendy. Fly, of course, he said, stretching out his arms. Wendy gasped. Fly? It's easy, Peter grinned. You think of a wonderful thought. Wendy, John, and Peter all thought very happy thoughts, but still they could not fly. Peter realized they were missing something important. Pixie dust. He borrowed some from Tinkerbell and sprinkled a bit of it on each of their heads. And before they knew it, Wendy, John, and Michael were floating in the air. We can fly, they shouted. We can fly. Peter leaped up to the windowsill. Here we go, off to Neverland. Soon they landed on a big puffy cloud high above Neverland, and Wendy, John, and Michael began to point out the places they recognized from Wendy's tales. Suddenly, Peter shouted, Look out! A heavy cannonball shot past them, narrowly missing their heads. They were under attack. It was Peter's sworn enemy, the dastardly Captain Hook. Quick, think! Peter shouted. Take Wendy and the boys to the island. I'll stay here and draw Hook's fire. Tink was jealous of Wendy and the boys. They were getting all of Peter Pan's attention, so she flew to the island very fast, so fast that the children could not keep up. Tinkerbell rushed into Hangman's tree, the secret hideout where Peter's loyal friends, the Lost Boys, lived with Peter. The Lost Boys were wild and dressed like animals, but they would do anything Peter asked. Tink lied, telling them that Wendy was attacking the island, and the Lost Boys scrambled to defend Peter's hideout. Aiming with their slingshots, they pummeled poor Wendy. Just as Wendy was about to crash, Peter Pan swooped in and caught her. Peter was very angry at Tinkerbell for playing that trick on Wendy, so he banished her, but only for a week, because Tinkerbell was the most important person in the world to him. Tinkerbell flew away in a huff. Wendy, John, and Michael were eager to see the island, so Peter Pan took Wendy to Mermaid Lagoon, while the Lost Boys took John and Michael to other parts of Neverland. While Wendy and Peter were talking to the mermaids, they saw Captain Hook row by in a boat with his first mate, Mr. Smee. They had a captive. It was Peter Pan's friend, Princess Tiger Lily. Peter and Wendy followed the pirates to Skull Rock, where Captain Hook had Tiger Lily tied up. He was trying to make her tell him the location of Peter's secret hideout. Peter swooped in, dagger drawn, and fought Hook, chasing him away. Then Peter and Wendy freed Tiger Lily and returned her home. But Captain Hook did not give up quite so easily. He knew that Tinker Bell was still very angry with Peter for banishing her. So Hook kidnapped Tinker Bell and tricked her into revealing Peter's hideout. Once Tink marked the spot on the map, Hook locked her up in a lantern on his ship. That night, Captain Hook, Mr. Smee, and the pirates quietly surrounded Hangman's tree. Then, when Wendy and the boys stepped outside, Hook's men grabbed them, tied them up, and took them to the ship. But Hook wasn't done just yet. He had a plan to get Peter, who was still inside Hangman's tree. Hook carefully lowered a package into Peter's hideout on a long rope. The package was wrapped up like a present, but inside was a ticking bomb. Back on Hook's ship, the pirates celebrated their victory over Peter Pan. Captain Hook gleefully told Wendy and the boys that if they didn't join his crew, they would have to walk the plank. Wendy refused. "Peter Pan will save us," she said. Captain Hook laughed and twirled his thin mustache so he told Wendy about the bomb in Peter's tree. "Peter Pan will be blasted out of Neverland forever," Hook said, crackling. "No!" gasped Wendy. Then Tinker Bell heard Hook's evil plan. She broke out of the lamp and raced to Hangman's tree to warn Peter. But moments later, from the deck of the ship, Wendy and the boys saw a huge explosion on the island. Peter's hideout was gone. Had Tink been able to save him? It was time for Wendy to walk the plank. She bravely stepped over the edge and fell. But then the most curious thing happened. There was no splash. Hook and Smee were baffled. They peered over the side of the ship, but there was no Wendy and no ripple in the water. Was it a trick? Was it a curse? No, it was Peter Pan. Tinker Bell and Peter had saved Wendy. Peter Pan flew Wendy to safety at the top of the ship. Then he confronted Hook. "This time you've gone too far," Peter said, pulling out his dagger. Hook drew his sword and he and Peter began to duel. Hook thrust, swiped, and stabbed with his sword, but Peter Pan flew away just out of Hook's reach. "Fly, fly, fly, you coward!" Hook snarled. "You wouldn't dare fight old Hook man to man." "Nobody calls Pan a coward and lives. I'll fight you man to man," said Peter, "with one hand behind my back." They clashed on the tall mast of the ship. Peter kept his sword and did not fly away. Hook disarmed him, and just when it seemed like Peter Pan was doomed, he yanked the ship's flag over Hook's head and took away his sword. "You're mine, Hook," Peter said. Captain Hook and the pirates fled from the ship, never to be seen again. "Hooray! Hooray for Captain Peter!" Wendy and the boys cheered. Tinker Bell sprinkled pixie dust all over the pirate ship. It began to float higher and higher into the sky. Finally, When the ship was up among the clouds, Peter set a course for London. When Wendy woke up by the window sill, she noticed they were back home in the nursery with her parents. They paused to look up into the night sky to see a ship made out of clouds. I have the strangest feeling I've seen that ship before. A long time ago, when I was very young, Mr. Darling said. He realized Wendy didn't need to grow up just yet. The end. I hope you enjoyed listening to the story Disney's Peter Pan. Please don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to listen to more of our favorite book stories. See you soon!